I being overconfident? Am I becoming complacent about complacency?
I think you are.
Oh, he's not the Messiah. He's just a very naughty boy.
Yeah, I've got big ears.
Brian just wanted to see anyone. Piss off.
That's the one, because you literally complete me, and we complete each other.
You've obviously encountered discrimination in your own life by virtue of being Australian. So
Hey, Manuel Kant was a real pissant who was very rarely stable.
I don't want to get too gushy, but I might just be saying you complete me, D. P&G now stands for Pritchard and Good.
Branding is not a bad blind date.
Look at you! You are insane!
How did I do that?
You're
How
insane!
did I do that? You're insane. That's how it goes. Welcome to Corona TV today. It is an interesting day. It's an interesting day to do a show. I kind of feel like the guy over my shoulder. I'm getting better at pointing in the exact opposite direction that I know I need to point. I feel like almost like my entire show notes have been thrown up in the air. More on that later. But I felt like it was important to maintain the direction, the focus, the integrity of the show, right? A show about hope, positivity, and optimism. And if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing. There is a lightheartedness. There is a irreverence. There is a bit of self-deprecation. But there is also passion and intensity and focus and being able to talk about the important things in life. It's important to be able to, sing umpapa, 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 but it's also important to recognize life and the events of the last 24 hours. And I'm going to attempt to do both. And I think my guest today, I know will be able to help as well. And no doubt you have to be nimble enough to pivot. And I'm pivoting today on a variety of levels and reasons. And you will see why soon enough. Well, today is actually, it's very disturbing, isn't it, right? Today is National Bobblehead Doll Day, right? National Bobblehead Doll Day. And it's funny because, I could show you this one, right? I could show you I'm just nervous. I'm actually I'm not normally like this. Using my microphone. I'll just, where should I put Rick? I don't know where I want to put Rick. I could show you Rick Grimes, but I'm actually going to show you also another bobblehead doll that I bought just over 4 years ago. So I bought this guy, right? I bought him because I wanted to capture a moment in history. I had no idea that he would become the president of the United States. And for 4 years, I've positioned him in a corner facing the corner of my shelf, as in go to the corner. You've been a bad, bad, bad boy. And so this bobblehead doll has been sitting there for 4 years. I've been waiting to replace him with some new bobblehead dolls. Now, I don't have those new bobblehead dolls, but I do have these two dolls as well that finally will be taking over. This episode today is, as I try not to be political, but at the same time, I do feel like I needed to address the incidents of what happened. And you probably saw, you see what I mean? I'm like in a bit of a mess, me scrolling through some of the other slides. So I just want to get straight into the seated soliloquy, which is called What Happened Yesterday. Look, I'm still not sure I fully comprehend what did happen yesterday. We had words like insurrection and coup, the incredible phrase, a day that will live in infamy, being used again. Now, as politicians do, there was a lot of grandstanding. And I felt at times the speeches on the floor were just auditions or premonitions of bigger aspirations and future campaigning plans. Nevertheless, blood was spilled. 4 people died. The US Capitol was breached. And if you weren't aware, the last time that that happened was more than 200 years ago by British troops who set fire to the building during a broader attack on Washington. I was relieved to get an email last night from the Westport Superintendent of Schools. I want to just read you a little clip from that. He said, "My purpose for addressing the school community is to reassure parents that our team will be ready to receive our students Thursday and serve them in the most professional manner. This is our calling among the noblest of professions. Our team is working this evening to make certain that faculty and staff have resources assembled to support their work tomorrow and beyond. Each level will work to maintain an age-appropriate approach. Our high school students are close to voting age. Among the relevant topics for classroom discussions are the process of elections, the constitutional role of Congress in presidential elections, and the idea that the events that transpired today are more about our democracy than politics." That's just an excerpt from that email. Now contrast that with newly sworn in Congresswoman from Southern Illinois, Representative Mary Miller, who, and I kid you not, quoted Adolf Hitler as she spoke outside the US Capitol on Tuesday, saying, quote, "If we win a few elections, we're still going to be losing unless we win the hearts and minds of our children. This is the battle. Hitler was right on one thing. He said, whoever has the youth has the future." Close quote. We are living in confusing times, but make no mistake, there is no confusing right from wrong, good from evil, light from dark, and sun from salt. Each and every one of us needs to wisen up, wake up, step up, make a conscious choice, be accountable to that choice, and live by that choice. It's not just CCTV, your social media history, a screenshot, or Google that marks or stains your permanent record. It's your very soul and conscience and the legacy that you leave behind to and through your children. Trust me, our generation and its older and younger counterparts, we're too far gone. There's not much redemption left in us. We've done enough damage. It's undetermined if there's any salvation left for us. So perhaps all that is left for us to do is to educate, empower, and enlighten the generations that will follow so that they can steer us back to the righteous path and lead us forward once again. And we do not need to quote Adolf, but rather Winston, who said, "Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it." Well, I really needed and wanted to get that out. I'm happy to discuss it with you, but more importantly, I have just a terrific, smart, intelligent, insightful, and apparently not forgetful, I was the forgetful one, man with me today, my guest, Neal Schaffer. Neal is the CEO of PDCA. He is, a social, digital, and social media marketing consultant. He's a speaker. He is an author. He will be with me shortly. But before I bring him on, just a reminder that tomorrow, Jory Desjardins, Angus Nelson, Tom Morris, Rohit Bhargava, and Mark Masters will be part of our community extravaganza. Happy Facebook birthday to my Facebook friends, Tom Bowman, Joel Greenberg, and then, of course, all of my LinkedIn connections, Tim Holliday, Mark Rice, Terry Torok. I didn't want to forget about you at all. But now it's time to focus on Neal Schaffer. I said Mark Schaffer. See, I'm in a total tiz, and I'll explain to you again why in just a moment. Neal Schaffer is a leading authority on helping businesses through their digital transformation of sales and marketing through consulting, training, and helping enterprises large and small develop and execute on social media marketing strategy, influencer marketing, and social selling initiatives. President of the social media agency PDCA Social, Neal also teaches digital media to executives at Rutgers University, the Irish Management Institute, and I'm not even going to pronounce it. I'm going to try. The University of Jyväskylä in Finland. Fluent in Japanese and Mandarin Chinese, Neal is a popular social media speaker and has been invited to speak about digital media on 4 continents in a dozen countries. He's also the author of 3 books on social media, including Maximize Your Social, and in March of 2020, published his 4th book, The Age of Influence, The Power of Influencers to Elevate Your Brand. On educating the market on the why and the how, every business should leverage the potential of influencer marketing. Neal resides in Irvine, California, but also frequently travels to Japan. Let's welcome him on the show. Welcome, Neal Schaffer, who is not Irish.
Not Irish. I almost feel like being on the show, I need to start with a
you can. I mean, it's Diane Hessen in all her glory as well. So let's begin. I try and there's the old saying which says, fake it till you make it. And sometimes people can pull off amazing things by winging it and not kind of letting people into, opening up the kimono, letting them into the sausage factory. Last night I went to bed and I thought to myself, I don't think that he filled out the Google Doc, but I'm sure he'll get to it because he's on the West Coast. And then this morning, no Google Doc, and I couldn't work out why. And then I emailed you and I said, I really do hope you're an early riser because that Google Doc needs to be filled out. Of course, what I didn't realize was 2 things. One, I had not actually sent the Google Doc out to you and shared it with you. And just Murphy's Law, there's the Irishman again. Normally, I'm very good about just sending a little reminder email. But also, you didn't exactly go to bed early last night, did you?
No. Yeah, obviously, with everything that unfolded, I needed to see it through, just like everyone in Congress did.
And how did it work out? I think it worked out well.
It did. It was
things considered, right?
It was well. If you watched it, it ended at I'm on the West Coast. It ended about 12:40 a.m. But a congressman from Wisconsin was going to object about the Wisconsin vote, which would have drawn it out an hour or 2 more. And Vice President Pence, who was overseeing the operation, said, "Hey, we need to have objection has to be signed, and it has to include someone from the House of Representatives and someone from the Senate." And he said, "Well, the representative from the Senate was going to sign, but they backed out of it." And then Vice President said, "Well, then the objection is cannot stand." And Joseph, as you said, people going through the motions and saying these things yesterday, looking at their future political standing. It reminds me of, I went to liberal arts college and I was on my way to work in Japan, and I had done my junior abroad in Beijing, and I was in Beijing during the Tiananmen demonstration. So I've seen how history can just unfold right in front of your eyes without you realizing it. And I'll never forget, my professor said, "Neal, I've lived in Beijing and I've lived in Kyoto," which is where I was going. And he goes, "What I find is no matter where you go in the world, we are all actors and actors. We all have to act out a role." And he goes, "If you can understand how to act out that role in Beijing and act out that role in Kyoto, you're going to do very well in life." And I sort of saw a lot of actors yesterday and actresses going through the motions, trying to please other people, whether they be the people they think they are their constituents, or the people in, whether it's the Republican Party or the leader himself. It was just a very bizarre day, which goes against everything American of being a free thinker, of thinking for yourself, of trying to, you're sworn in as a government official to protect the Constitution, to protect the people. It's so bizarre that people at the highest level can go against that. And it was embarrassing as an American. and many people on TV said the same thing. This is something you report about in countries around the world. When Turkey says, Turkish citizens beware of gatherings, right? It's true. It's just really bizarre. And hopefully, I thought 4 years ago would be a wake up call. Hopefully this becomes the wake up call that enough is enough and we need to move forward. And this is just completely irrational what's gone on here, and we need to correct it. And I it's either going to be the beginning of a great America or the beginning of what we're going to see more of in the future. And obviously I'm hopeful, as this show is all about hope, that it's the beginning of a great America. But I think it really starts with the prosecution, with the investigation and prosecution of what happened, because just as you said, Joseph, history will repeat itself if these people are not shown for who they are, which are they're insurgent domestic terrorists. It was a coup d'etat, whatever you want to call it, right? So it'll be very, very interesting to see how things unfold, not only until January 20th, but after the president is in office.
I mean, and it could, the other part is it could be the beginning of the end. It could be the end of America as we know it, or, to use, you're going to see a common thread today in today's show of a book. And the writing of a book. It could be the end of one chapter and the beginning of a new chapter. And certainly this country has seen closing the book on some chapters that we were only too eager to have to close the book on in order to start a new chapter or a new section or a new theme. And that is a gift. It is a gift to be able to actually have another chapter and for this not to be the end. But we are, Tom Morris says, Neal is right about all the performances. We need to revive statesmanship in our time. I guess I want to pick up on something that you said, Neal, which is this idea of performing a role. It can be taken two ways. One is you're playing the role that people expect you to play. And maybe there's a certain inauthenticity about that. But then there's the other one about stepping up and stepping into a role. The role of the hero, the role of the leader, the role of the of the servant leader as well. We saw someone like Mitt Romney, I think, do that last night. And then we saw two other roles, right? We saw one role which was, the about face, or just the ability to say, hey, we felt this, but now we thought this, but now we think that. And so you went from the objectors, that number dwindled. And then, of course, you had the 5 or the 6 that were left there at the end. And I feel that role now, whether they like it or not, that will always be their role. And they will never shirk it, nor should they be allowed to.
Yeah, hopefully those people go down in history. I think in Senate, where it was only 6 or 7, it was clear. The House, there were 80, 90. So it's going to be a little bit harder to count and remember all of them. But you're right. And I think of 9/11, George W. Bush really didn't seem like he was fit for the role, but he became very presidential in how he came out in public, went to New York, spoke. And I think that you never know as a president or as a leader in a company as well, what's going to hit you the next day. But it's when that happens, can you step into that role, right? In many ways, I thought that Vice President Pence sort of stepped into that role when the National Guard didn't come in. We're still trying to confirm what happened. He made sure they came in, even though the president was not being responsive to it. So, and many of the speeches, even from fellow Republicans, they stepped in. They realized that it was nonsense what had happened. It was a danger to the democracy. So you're right. It can be read both ways. And history is always evolving, but we are in control of it, and we have to make sure this doesn't happen again. And the only way to do that, like I said, is really to investigate how this happened at every level and make sure it doesn't happen. And that is the role that I hope the president, and as someone who supported President Obama, I think many Democrats on the left, like I am, said, when you controlled the House, you controlled the Senate the first 2 years, why didn't you more forcefully push through an agenda that the American people supported? So I'm hoping that President Biden and Vice President Harris really take this opportunity to do that now that they have control in the first 2 years, to make up for 4 years of pure nonsense of what happened in the government of the United States, the highest level. It's the only way I can describe it, really.
Yeah, and look, the beauty of it is that it will all unfold live, streaming, and and accountability and transparency hopefully will be the order of the day. I appreciate your point of view, and being able. I felt I would have been remiss not addressing this on the show. It was too conspicuous and even borderline egregious. And I don't know that many of us are aware, or even, I don't even think, it almost seemed like I was watching a movie. But it could have been so much worse. It could have been so much worse. And I think one of the points that chilled me was, I don't think that many of the mob and protesters realized how easy it would have been to have been able to kind of break into the building. But if they'd taken people hostage, if there'd been, it was just awful. But here we are, we get another shot at being able to move forward, and forward, we will move, hopefully. So again, I appreciate you being with me on this day and being able to share this together, and also with people that are watching. But I want to move over to something that you said. Obviously, sometimes there's something beautiful about a Google Doc that is not completed, because it is like a book that is not completed. It is like a story that is unfolding. You said something on your website that just absolutely touched me, and I was like, well, this is what the show's about. You said, we all have a book to write about our life, and I am no different. And, normally I find a quote that is something that enforces something that my guest says, and something that would validate them and agree with them. This is one that I disagree with, and I think you would too. And so this is your quote. Your life story would not make a good book. Don't even try. And that was, you're not going to guess who said it, unless you know. So I'll tell you, that was Fran Lebowitz. I disagree with that statement. Do you disagree with it too?
I completely disagree with it.
So, I mean, it's okay, Fran. You can come on the show and debate Neal and myself if you want. But I didn't like that. I didn't like it. Tell me why you don't like it, and then I'll tell you why I don't like it.
Well, it almost sort of devalues. It devalues everybody. It's sort of condescending. It's this person saying only a good book has to be of this level, and your life story alone would not be at that level. I mean, it's a very negative way of looking at life, because every book has a story to it. It has heroes, it has characters, and these are all elements of common life. So Joseph in life that I couldn't have an interesting conversation with. People are natural storytellers. People experience things. We can all learn from other people. So I guess the heart of it, this quote is almost saying, like, we have nothing to learn from you. We have nothing to be inspired by you, when everybody is inspiring in their own way.
And I think it also talks to the fact that only interesting people, celebrities, actors, sports stars, musicians, politicians are interesting, as opposed to the man or the woman in the street, Joe Average. You and I are experienced in the digital world, in the social media world. We understand the power of elevation and how ordinary people can realize extraordinary aspirations if given the platform and the opportunity. And that's why I pushed back on this quote. And in direct reference, by the way, to what you wrote about yourself and about your life story. And that's what I thought would be the perfect backdrop for today's conversation. So I'm going to pull up, that in a moment. But, you haven't even had one near death experience. You've had two. Why don't you tell us about those chapters in your life story?
Well, this all happened. I grew up in Southern California, and I grew up in an area where a lot of my friends were Asian American, Chinese American, Korean American, Japanese American. So when I went to college, I said I'm gonna learn an Asian language, and I decided to learn Chinese. Most of my friends were Chinese, and I was going to try to sort of connect the dots as to was there a connection here. And it was during that year abroad in China where I had two interesting things happen to me. One was in a summer in Taiwan. On my way to China, I did a summer intensive in Taiwan, and I was at this beautiful mountain called Alishan, which is, Taiwan doesn't have many high mountains. This is, one of the highest, and it's the place where you go to watch the sunrise. And people wake up early, and it's just a beautiful spot. Well, we were there, and there were just these heavy torrential summer rains, and as the roads were closed, buses could not come up the roads. There were no trains leading there, so we literally had to walk down this mountain. I don't know how many miles we walked, and there was a portion of the road that was washed out. And in order to get to the other side, and I don't know what I wrote on my website, but maybe 50, 60 meters, we had to basically straddle the gutter. The gutter was the only thing remaining, and it's 100-foot, 200-foot drop below you if you get out of balance. And that was the first time in my life where it's like, take any possession of mine, take my passport, take my wallet. I don't need anything. I just want to get to the other side of the road. But it was really later on that year in Beijing. My roommate and I flew to Harbin, which is in Northeast China. They have this beautiful ice lantern festival, and it's been replicated now, but I think they were really one of the first. And, China at the time was a very poor country. This is 1988, 89. But this lantern festival of putting these beautiful, colorful lights and sculptures all done in ice, it was something I had to see. And when we got there, this is really close to Siberia. So there's this huge river, hundreds of meters across, that was completely frozen. There were people on the river that were like wind skating. It was amazing, actually, because I'm a Southern California native. I'm a beach boy. So I told my friend, let's walk on the river, right? It was so exciting to me. I'd never done that in my life. And I was really into, I was into selfies before selfies, because I had a little, maybe this will ring a bell. I had a camera, a Vivitar camera, if you remember that brand. And I was really into taking self-time shots. That was like the killer functionality of this camera. So I said, Kenji, we got to take a shot of us on the river. And there was no place to put the camera. And then I'm like, oh, over there's some boats that are frozen in. I'll just put the camera on top of the boat. And as I said, okay, you stay here, Kenji. I walked over to the boat, put the camera on. We got the picture. I walked back to get the camera, and as I returned back to Kenji, I literally felt myself sinking. And it's one of those things, Joseph, if you're in one of these scenarios, what seems like a lifetime was probably only 1 or 2 seconds. But I slowly felt myself slipping into the river. And all I could see, I was just looking down at the ice cracking. And I just, instinctively, I held my arms out. As I was, I couldn't think of anything else to do. I held my arms out, and thankfully, and it's amazing to this day to think about it, because you hear every year of people dying and of falling into frozen lakes and rivers, and the ice held, and I was able to pull myself back up. And my roommate said, "Hey, make sure you walk around in a long circle so you don't crack any more ice." And I was able to live another day. And when you go through an experience like that, yeah, I mean, every day it might be your last day. And I'm thankful for every day I have. And I think, talking about what we talked about today, I don't really do a lot of political speaking on social media. I keep social media very much for business, for professional, but there's a certain time in life when you have a conscience. And those of us that have influence, and it was really writing The Age of Influence and about influencers and influencer marketing. If you have influence at some point, and you have a conscience, you sort of have to use the gifts that you've been given to voice something for the good of everybody. And that's why over the past year, as these unprecedented events have happened and have really brought into public debate things like science and government and medicine, doing for the greater good. And then we have Black Lives Matter. And Joseph, I was, I went on this whole podcast tour when I came out with my book, and it was March 2020, and I was about to be on a podcast. This is the Wharton Business School, have a very, very famous podcast or radio show really on Sirius XM. And I was going to be interviewed on it. Now it was huge, right? And I log on, come on 10 minutes early. 5 minutes before the show, the host says, "Hey, Neal, the Black Lives Matter protest started yesterday. We're going to talk about it today. Are you okay with that?" And I wasn't prepared, right? But that's the way life is. If you are a CEO of a brand, if you're the CEO of Nike, when that stuff happens, you have to respond, right? So I felt like I had to respond. And that's why, today when it's like, "Neal, we're going to talk about what happened yesterday." Yes, because that's what life is. You have to respond to what happens in the world. And there is no one right way. The only right way is in your heart. It's how much you've studied history. It's your conscious. It's your mission on this earth. And it really cuts down to the core of who you are and why you're here. And I'm here to help businesses. I'm here to help people. But I'm also here to share my perspective. And what I found, Joseph, even on things like Facebook, where I've gotten a little bit political, is for every one or two crazy people who I've had to block, there are 10 or 20 who say, "Thank you for voicing this, Neal." It's someone who had COVID-19, who still has symptoms months after. "Thank you for taking the courage to bring this up." Because no matter what, it's only when other people talk about it will action actually be taken. Of people who say, "Well, it's only a 2% mortality rate." Well, only 3% of Europeans died in World War II in 1939. So it's only 2%, it's so there's a need for us to speak up. And I think what's happened over the last year or two is those on the other end, on the fringe elements of society, are being very loud. And I think people within the Republican Party have gotten very savvy of understanding how social media works and how to use bots and how to activate people to be very, very loud, whether it's online or offline. And I think that, we talk about silent majority, which thankfully we are. I think we need to be a little bit more vocal and stand up for what we believe in. And as I was watching, I loved how a very eloquent letter from the Westport School, by the way. But as my 15-year-old daughter and I were watching what happened, and her name is Luna. I said, "Luna, I hope that your generation becomes a lot more serious about politics. You are the future than previous generations. And if you want to change the world, you can." And I hope that this is a positive thing from people who saw this, because as an American, I felt nauseous yesterday watching what happened. And I really hope it's a call to arms to young people to get involved. They are the future. They can shape it. And there is hope. There's always hope, right? But there's only hope if we are able to look at why this happened, make sure it doesn't happen again, and move forward.
Bravo. I would stand, but then, and my wife will hate me saying this, you'll realize that I'm not wearing pants, but it's, that's how Corona TV works. We go from the sublime to the ridiculous and back to the sublime. You said a couple of things that I thought were really quite important and profound. The first is, let's talk about influence. So as someone who's also written on influence and influencer marketing and being an influencer, a legend in my own mind, as they refer to me, there is an acute difference between, by the way, Ritesh is applauding you, and he said, "Totally agree. The vocal minority has taken over the medium that helps spread hate so quickly." By the way, it's the same with customer service too, right? It's always the
true.
Anyway, but there is a world of difference between influence and popularity, and influence is very much qualitative, and popularity is quantitative. You've just added a third element to that I think is important, that we let marinate a bit and think about building on. And that word is responsibility. There is influence, there is popularity, and there is responsibility. And I've never thought about it that way. And I think if we actually built that into the model, that would be very different. It's one thing to talk about disclosure and transparency. It's another thing to recognize the power of the word, the voice, the platform and the connection that we have to people. And you were able to reduce it to the single thank you. Thank you for helping me when I was in a dark time. Thank you for helping me when I needed the help. You reduced it to that single solitary human connection. That's what influence is about, and influencer marketing.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And that concept of responsibility to me didn't come until after my book was published. And it's really something that my publicist said, that when she was trying to, pitch my book, and this is in March of 2020, if you don't have anything to say about coronavirus, you don't have anything to say. I mean, no one is going to cover you. And it was really, those were the days. And it was really where I got to thinking that, well, as what should the role of influencers be when there is something happening in society? Take the politics. We all know about that. That's, should influencers and celebrities have always sided with politicians. But when you have a movement like a pandemic or talking about Black Lives Matter, there is a responsibility if you have influence. And I think also your followers also sort of expect it of you, because they're probably talking about it as well. So I know that there are many who just shied away from it completely. But as humans, I think what 2020 has told us is that we, when people were saying, Neal, influencer marketing is going to die with COVID, I said, no, maybe the travel influencers are going to have a harder time traveling. And maybe some of the way they showcase the imagery, they want to make it more real, because now you see celebrities showing up without makeup and people are doing interviews from their home instead of a stage studio. And it's made us crave the real and authentic even more, right? So with that, if you were in a conversation with a friend, they'd probably ask you about COVID. They would ask you about, what do you think about what happened yesterday? So I think it's natural that, the influencer does have some responsibility to take a stand on behalf of their followers, on behalf of their community, on behalf of their fan, or at least have the conversation. Not everybody is doing that, like I said, but I felt the need to do that. And I feel, I have that blue verified check mark on Twitter, on Facebook, and I have the ability to sort of get a bigger voice out there, and really better represent what other people think. And if they don't have the voice and I do, then I have to use it. So that was my thought process.
Okay, so I want to just add something to that. And we don't even need to find out about the second near-death experience, because clearly the ice one was enough to break the ice today with us. But let's go back to, you said something again, very, very profound. You said, I have a responsibility, or we have a responsibility on behalf of our audience or our followers. That's a huge shift. That's not just magnanimously, I should talk, the ruler, the king, the megaphone, the influencer, the speaker. You're actually making that connection to every fan, friend, follower, audience member, listener of your podcast, and saying, I owe it to you during tough times to have a point of view. You hear from me during all of the great times and the awesome times to tell you about how great life is or how smart I am. But these are the tough conversations that need to have. And I thought that was a very important point. And it does signify a change in how we talk to our audience, I would say.
Yeah, I think that anybody who has influence realizes that their influence lies in their community. It lies in the trust that people have in them. And, with celebrities, it might be a little bit different, but in social, well, I guess celebrities, it's the same really. But, it's the trust that your community has that true influencers will decide which brands that reach out to them they want to work with and which they don't want to work with, which types of products they want to talk about, which ones they don't want to talk about, because it's irrelevant to their brand, irrelevant to their community. So it really is an extension of that. And I think those that realize that, and yes, the saying goes, avoid politics. You don't want to, endanger your community. But on the other hand, if you feel strongly about something, it's going to come out sooner or later. Whether even if you avoid it, it will come out somewhere in your content, in a speech, in a conversation like we're having today. So I would rather you lose 5% of your community that at some point you were probably going to get into a mental philosophical conflict with, and have the 95% become an even bigger fan of you, even feel more attached to you. Because this is all, it's like no trust, right? It's human emotions. And there's nothing more powerful than in the time of need. And I was telling businesses after COVID-19, businesses exist to serve society, and society needs you. So this isn't a time to be silent. It's a time to step up and help your community, not just, promote your brand, but help in ways outside of your brand. How can you help them as human beings? And I believe the same for influencers. How can you help your community? How can you talk about what happened? How can you help them help them feel good that there is hope, and that we can together, influence positive action, pun intended.
Okay, so now we're in a very, very interesting murky middle ground, because you began by talking about roles, right? There are roles we play in our lives. There are roles that we are expected to play. There is a role that each social media platform plays, right? My authentic voice is different on Instagram compared to TikTok, compared to LinkedIn, compared to Facebook.
Indeed.
And then there is a blurring of those roles that is occurring clearly, especially with work life, work home, etc. But then you have the brand, quagmire of what does a brand say? When does a brand say something? Should a brand say something? Where do you sit on the whole, we're all in this together, and this tone deafness that we've seen across the board from COVID through Black Lives Matter, through we're open again, through the election, etc., where it just seems that, the only time a brand takes its left foot out its mouth is to insert right foot.
Yeah, I wasn't, I'm glad that they spent a lot of money to say that we're in this together, but it's really those brands that did actions. And I think about the smaller businesses, like, we decided to lower our gasoline prices by 50%, 50 cents indefinitely. This is a local gasoline station here in Tustin, California, that I would go out of my way to go to this gas station because they really were the lowest prices at the time. And they said something that really struck with me. So I think it's about action. And I think if I'm a brand with Black Lives Matter, and that movement is not dead by any means, and it's going to, especially when you juxtapose how Black Lives Matter's protesters were dealt with on Capitol Hill versus some fringe elements that we saw yesterday who were able to get into the Capitol. But I digress. But, I think that at the end of the day, you have to have conversations about inclusivity, about diversity, and have them with your employees, have them with the community. Talk about that, right? If you want to promote something, promote the fact that you're trying to change. And I think that's the most important message. Change doesn't happen overnight, but people, and I consult with some companies that serve. One of my clients primarily serves the African American community here in the United States, and there were some videos that went viral about their product. There were some emails they started getting about product name or the way the product was being displayed on retail, the box design, and also and they made changes and they responded. But even before that, they should be in tune with their community, right? Social media gives you a great way to find out what makes your community tick, what makes your followers tick, what makes your customers tick. And I just think that, I'm a marketer, right? And, I have really shifted gears with the age of influence and with all the events that I've seen over the last year. And I'm telling brands now, social media, it's not a marketplace. It's a place of collaboration, and it's a place for communication, right? It's a place to truly understand, why people like you, why people buy your product, what are they talking about, to make friends with them and to establish relationships with them, including those, other influencers that exist. But I think when you take the mind shift of saying, we're going to promote the hell and try to get as many clicks on our products on social, to we're going to have a 100% user-generated content strategy. We're going to encourage word of mouth about our product by actually engaging with people, caring what people think, and having conversations with them. And we're sort of going back to the beginning of social media when it was owned by public relations, not marketing, right? When it was a one-to-one approach rather than a one-to-many approach. And I'm tending to think, including the way you work with influencers, that is actually a better approach. So, I don't know how many companies will do this in the future, but I surely would hope that in our second decade of social media, as we've seen how scary of a place it can be, I also hope that companies will sort of wake up to understanding that their best insurance against all this is just to be better in touch with their community. There's no easier, and have conversations, understand what's going on. And in that way, you would know right away if they need to take a stand on something, right? So I think that, there's always opportunity out there. I don't know how many of your audience are marketers, but that would be my strategy going forward.
Well, Ritesh is in, I know him from the agency world, and he said the thing I get concerned about is how influencers have only been tied to ROI and ultimately sales by marketers, and not things like brand building and brand reputation. And I'll let you respond to that too. But the thing that struck me in your response is that the thing that will save social media is to get back to basics. And you use words like community, collaboration, conversation, but this idea of being in touch with, connected to, and also finally this concept of it must be ongoing. Marketing is, I know I'm quoting myself here, but still, marketing is not a campaign, it is a commitment. And it's the commitment that we need to see, the ongoing commitment.
And influencer marketing is not a campaign. An influence is always on, right? It's not like you activate someone tomorrow and they're gone tomorrow. These are people. And Joseph, that was how I first found out about you, was from that quote. I don't know if you remember, at a PRSA party in San Diego, California, many moons ago, when Brian Solis was holding up this big mug of champagne and pouring drinks. But yeah, no, that's exactly it. And I do believe it is time to go back to basics in all of this. I talk more about the basics of digital marketing these days as well. The importance of SEO, of email, when you live in a digital first world. And I also think, Joseph, it's looking back at history. At some point, you gotta step back and go, okay, TikTok's here. We've seen a move from Snapchat. We now have TikTok, but it's not going to be appropriate for every business. And even for businesses that it's appropriate for, does it make sense for your employees to go on camera, or does it make sense to collaborate with others in your community? The skateboarders promoting Ocean Spray, although I don't think he was directly promoting them. But that's the way I look at it. And we always need to not accept the status quo, but challenge it. And I think the brands that challenge the status quo of how they do business, of how they market themselves, of how they communicate, are the ones that seem to cut through the noise and really grow, in my experience. It's the brands that said, we don't need legacy marketing. We're just going to start with an Instagram account and we're going to collaborate with influencers. You see a lot of startups that have been very, very successful doing this because they've aligned themselves with the times and how and where people communicate. And any big brand can do this. In my book, I don't know if I say it outright, but any brand has the money to bring someone in and start a YouTube channel or start a TikTok account or become an Instagram influencer. Brands have the money to do this, but they're not people, right? And as that comment you showed, it's all about that ROI. And if that's all you're going for, you miss the big picture, and you miss the possibility of actually connecting and influencing. So a lot of the, Joseph, as you know, a lot of it just mindset. And, what is the role of marketing? Obviously, yes, you need money to survive, but what role does each one of these social and digital and marketing channels have, or should they have? And that's really where the conversation has to be. And more, marketing executives have to stand up and have that conversation. Because I think, once again, Joseph, coming from the early days of social media, we always have to be educating people internally on what social media is and how businesses should be utilized. I think just like 10 years ago, we need to have that conversation again and really wake up to better align our communication with social media users.
Well, I have posted or pasted, I should say, links to Neal's book and his terrific podcast in the comments below on the various socials that you are watching this on and through. Neal, I want to go back to this amazing concept about the book on your life. And first of all, I just find it so creative and innovative that you've essentially put your bio or your resume or just, you know, just this as chapters in your life, right? So I was going through this and just seeing all these amazing, interesting things, and, you know, thinking to myself, what the hell is windmill networking, and what is a fractional CMO? What exactly is a fractional CMO? But there were two things that I had to ask you about. And clearly, you know a thing or two. I mean, as evidenced by great collection of some of the interviews and presentations you're given. But the thing that I wanted to go back to was the rebranding of this is one chapter I want to read, the rebranding of Neal Schaffer and what's next. And I would love for you to tell us about those two little snapshots into the book. And before I forget, are you actually going to write a book on your life? Because you should.
Okay, so 3 questions. I'll do the first one. I do not intend to write my life story in a book. However, I do want to complete that start here page that you know, Joseph showed you the table of contents. A lot of that stuff is yet to be developed. So I want to continue to write that. And you fill in all the gaps there. I think I stopped in about the year 2009 or 10. So I still got a ways to go. But you know, I go back to that Steve Jobs graduation speech at Stanford University that went viral after he passed away, which is, you know, always connect the dots to your past. And in that you find your future. And so I'm always trying to do that. And for me, creating that page, part of why I did that was to do that, but also it allows me to bring out stories to get my point across, right? So, you know, when you speak or when you write, there's the use of data to prove points, but there's the use of experiences, other people's experiences, or even best your own experiences that can best illustrate and drive that point home and really solidify an emotional connection with the reader, with the listener. And that's really what storytelling is all about, right? And there's no better way to do it than with something you have personally experienced. Anybody can go up on stage and talk about social media marketing. And I'll never forget, Joseph, at the very beginning, people were showing that socialnomics video of you know, Eric Qualman of, you know, this 3-minute video with the funky music. And these are all the social media stats. And I was thinking, you know, anybody could go up on stage, show the video. What value are you adding? And the only value we add is perspective and insight. And that can only come from our experiences, right? So for me, that's very important. But writing that also is connected with the rebranding of Neal Schaffer, because as I was writing The Age of Influence, I realized that in social media, people rule, and the algorithms are always going to favor people over businesses for many reasons, because people resonate more with people. No matter how much you try to humanize your brand, you can't, because at the end of the day, you're a corporate entity and you're in it for money, right? So it's only natural then, as I started with, you know, and you know, my background is more on the sales and biz dev than marketing side in full disclosure. But when I wrote my first book, which was on LinkedIn back in 2009, I'm like, I need to create a brand. I need to create something that's bigger than me. And therefore I created this brand, Windmill Networking. So I had a website, windmillnetworking.com. And then it's like, well, you know, I'm in, at the beginning, this wasn't a full-time gig. Now it is. So then it's like, well, you know, I need to have something that has like social media, social in the title. So I moved to something called Maximize Social Business. And then I came out with a book, Maximize Your Social, back in 2013. So then I took my personal parts from Maximize Social Business, created Maximize Your Social. But as I was writing the book, I realized that if you really want to become influential, you need to leverage who you are. And if you want to create an emotional connection with people, there's no better way to do that than to show how human you are. The more human stories, the more down and dirty you can get with near-death experiences, that only helps build deeper connection with people. And this is something that businesses can't do. It's something that people can do. And that's why the more it's like, I've been doing this all wrong. My brand is Neal Schaffer. I am Neal Schaffer. And if I want to yield any more influence or sell any more books, it all has to be one unified brand under Neal Schaffer. And by the way, for digital marketers listening, obviously think of all the 301 redirects I've had to create over this. If I had just stuck with nealschaffer.com since 2009, not to say I'm complaining about the domain authority I have right now, think about how much more I would have had, and think about how much more people would have said. I've had some of my guest bloggers will say, oh, I write for Maximize Social Business. They'll tell a colleague, like, oh, I've never heard about it. And they'll say, well, I write for Neal Schaffer's blog. Oh, really? Or my clients who put in the contract that Neal Schaffer will personally do this work. So I have a business name, Windmills in Marketing, doing business at PDCA Social. But at the end of the day, I realized businesses hire me for me, right? So why mess around with this whole branding? It's me. And when I realized that, it's like, I need to rebrand everything across every social channel, every digital property. It is Neal Schaffer, and going forward, it'll be singular. And therefore, whatever I do in life, that will not change, and that will continue to build authority and be very clear. And it'll allow me to easily share who I am and to share and really, part of influence is also, if you want to yield influence, you need to differentiate yourself from everybody out there. Right. And I think that the name, there aren't that many names out there in the space that people remember. Right. So those were all the thoughts I had that went into the rebranding of Neal Schaffer.
So I want to basically
there for the what's next.
I want to connect the dots, because I would say I need to Wikipediaize that chapter. I want to change the rebranding of Neal Schaffer to the debranding of Neal Schaffer, because it hit me as you were talking that all this, I'm going to use the word poppycock. I don't know why, but all this poppycock about personal branding and what is your personal brand, it's all BS. At the end of the day, your personal brand is you.
Yeah.
And what makes you different and differentiated is you and your unique perspective. And that's why that quote was so awful at the beginning, because everyone has a story. Everyone has value. Everyone has a perspective and insight, to your point. So it's not the rebranding, it's the debranding that ultimately allowed the authentic Neal Schaffer to shine through and to inspire so many others. And Ritesh says, this is so awesome. Hey, Neal Schaffer, thank you for sharing your story and dropping so much knowledge today. I have a 1 p.m. call I have to attend to. Great stuff, Jaffe, as usual. Come on, you Spurs. So, that's the authentic Ritesh Patel. And Tom Morris says, we're going to be pouring over Neal's website now like Talmudic scholars to mine it for all the insight. Never have the word Talmudic scholars and poppycock been mentioned within 60 seconds. Monif says he's just followed the podcast, excited to embark on such journey. I love the fact how you respond to each person as well. And Tom adds, I love what Neal is saying about the personal brand. I went from the primacy of the Morris Institute for Human Values to just tomvmorris.com. And there you go. So we have time for just a couple more things quickly. I just want to hear what's next for you. And then I have my Corona question for you.
Sure. What's next is, as I was talking about the age of influence this year, obviously virtually, but working with a lot of clients, I realized that with coronavirus, there is a need to be digital first in everything you do from a marketing perspective. And I was coming up with some concepts that I found that people just weren't talking about that seemed very natural to me in the way that I work and consult with businesses. And I looked around, I didn't find a lot of books that were talking about things in this way. So, Maximize Your Social, when it came out in 2013, one book review said this is a cliff notes of creating a social media marketing strategy. And I'm like, great, if it helps businesses, all the better. So it was very much a playbook for creating a social media marketing strategy. The Age of Influence has a playbook in it, but it's also more, conceptual and really understanding the role that influence plays in social media and how it can play in marketing. So this, I've decided to write another book, and I really want it to be more of that playbook. And it's going to be, once again, more of a holistic look at digital marketing, really. And I come from the social media marketing space, so I'm taking a social media marketing perspective on SEO, on these things that have been traditionally done in digital marketing, and trying to breathe new life into them for this post-coronavirus pandemic world that we live in. So that's my current passion. I've conceptualized. I'm hoping in the next month or two, I'm actually going to put together a proposal and send it off to my publisher. And hopefully a year from now, that'll be in the market.
Well, I look forward to you coming back onto the show to promote that book. I will be eager to read it. And before you go, I still think you should write the book on your life. What are your New Year's resolutions for 2021? This is the Corona question that I ask all of our guests from Monday through Friday. It can be a personal or a professional one.
Yeah, I think personal, it's, I realize just how inactive we are with the pandemic. So I finally decided to spend $100 and get a standing desk, which actually just came yesterday. So that's from a personal, in terms of, that alone is not going to help me lose weight and get more fit. But I do believe it'll be a good thing. And I'm looking forward to getting that on my desk today. So I'm gonna enact that. From a business perspective, it's funny because I come from a B2B world. So I have never had B2C products. I've had a book, but outside of a book, I really haven't had any ways to help more people that want help above and beyond reading my blog. So my resolution, in addition to writing that book, is to really come out with educational products that anybody can buy on my site. It's something that, for the last 10 years, a lot of other people have done. A lot of other people with less influence, less credibility, less experience have done very well doing that. So I'm a little bit late to the game, but I'm excited to, take my own approach to it. And just, it's all about serving people and adding value. And if people appreciate it and buy it, great. If not, then my New Year's resolution for 2022 will be somewhat different.
Well, I have to say that I enjoyed this so much that I'm considering scrapping the Google Doc completely and doing more of this, because it does speak to my authentic truth, which is connect with or reconnect with meaningful people, interesting people, and have meaningful, interesting conversations. And guess what? Every single person has a meaningful, interesting conversation and value to add. And you added that times 1,000. So Neal, thank you for coming in today. And I'm excited to move over to the Zoom after show. And the last word is never mine nor my guests, but of course, Mr. Chuck Norris.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
There you go. I'll see you tomorrow for Corona Community. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you for watching Corona TV with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. Corona TV is the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing. The after show on Zoom starts right now at bit.ly/Corona TV After Show. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show at CoronaTV.show. And if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, text Corona TV to 66866 or visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.